Hi, welcome to My Favorite Mistake. I'm your host, Mark Grabe, and our guest today is Dr. Josh McConkey. He is known as the MacGyver Doc. He's got a long list of credentials and experiences. He is an emergency physician, an Air Force Reserve commander, and a combat deployed medevac leader who spent his career solving problems in the kinds of environments where you often don't get second chances. He is a Pulitzer Prize nominated author. His books are Be the Weight Behind the Spear and The Heart of a Leader. That's a children's book, and I think we'll be able to talk about both of those here today. So his books draw on experiences ranging from battlefield medicine in Iraq to high stakes emergencies here at home. His focus is on leadership, resilience, and what it takes to bring clarity and courage to chaotic situations. So it's a real honor to have you here. Welcome to the show. How are you today?
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity.
We normally dive right into the favorite mistake question, but I got to ask you first about MacGyver Doc. What that
Yes.
means to you, and who first called you that? And
It was there was a publicity summit that was held last year, and I was just talking with some of the consultants, and they're like, "What haven't you done? You've been all over the place, the military and the healthcare background, author, traveled around the world, Africa, Europe, I'm boarded in Australasia, worked in Australia, New Zealand." And they just kind of came up with the MacGyver type of deal where I can literally probably be in almost any situation and feel pretty comfortable and figure it out. So, wow, it stuck.
hopefully on the field you're not having to rely on dental floss and that paper
Yeah.
clip. And I'm trying to
To,
remember
to diffuse
MacGyver.
bombs or something like that, right?
Yeah, use a few. So I'm fascinated to jump into the main topic. I don't know what aspect of your career this answer will come from, but what's your favorite mistake?
So for me, it's my favorite and the most painful by far. But in the business ventures, so I owned a freestanding emergency department in Texas,
Uh,
and we moved out there in 2018. The business was doing fantastic. We put so much work into that. I made an absolute egregious mistake in not doing my due diligence
Oh no.
and went into business with some very bad individuals. One in particular was a CEO that just, wow, within about a year, we're doing so well. We're making great money.
Uh-huh.
And then you start to peek behind the curtain, and there's $90,000 being spent for an attorney for some other lawsuit at another business that involved sexual harassment allegations.
No.
And then there was the skimming of payroll, so overcharging us about 130,000 through his management company, and then
Uh-huh.
straight up Medicare violations, which are
Oh,
illegal. Several.
and-
It got it got crazy pretty quick, and I reported him to the FBI, the Texas Department of Insurance,
uh-huh.
and he jumped in and offered me a $3.4 million bribe. So he had,
What?
yeah, he
Whoa.
had a canned statement from his attorney, like, here's $3.4 million. You're going to say, oh, I'm going to step away from the business and spend more time with family and just coast off into the breeze. And here's your $3.4 million. I know now that he's done that at several businesses. He was sued in Louisiana, Arizona, another location in Texas. And this guy owned majority shareholder ownership, which gives him all the rights. And unfortunately, he found the one dude on planet Earth that would turn down $3.4 million.
Yeah.
I told him to shove it up his rear end, and I would not compromise my integrity. I'm a military commander. I'm a colonel in the Air
Right.
Force Reserves. And he absolutely punished us. So drove the business into the ground. His whole goal was to just bankrupt the operational company and then just restart again because he
Yeah.
owned the physical location.
Yeah.
And I ended up losing about $5 million. We tried to file a lawsuit, but COVID hit. So all the courts were frozen. We couldn't get
Mm.
a court date. It was just horrible timing for me. And at the end of the day, the FBI didn't press charges because he hadn't done anything yet. And then after he threatened the family, I moved to Australia for a year to get away from him. And then as it comes full circle, 4 years later, we're back in North Carolina, and I won the North Carolina educational lottery. So the $5 million that I lost, I didn't win that much money, but
Uh-huh.
everything comes full circle. You try to do the right thing. And as painful as it was in those 4 years of losing that much money, just getting destroyed and
Mm,
just poor timing with COVID, I learned a lot of lessons that you can't control other people. You can only control how you deal with it.
yeah.
And, I stuck to my guns, the integrity won out in the end because I won the lottery.
Karma, like, it would be
Yeah.
one way of thinking about that. I'm so sorry to hear that you went through that. I mean, it sounds like this guy had a bit of a playbook.
He knew exactly what he was doing. He had done it at several other businesses. Had I done some more in-depth research on him, I would have seen the lawsuit at the previous location out in Round Rock, and that would have raised some red flags for me. He was a very smooth talker.
Mhm.
When you really look back on things, the responses to questions were more than just kind of playing dumb. He was actually lying. So, but he was very smooth. He's a very bright individual. He's a physician as well. He
Mhm.
just has zero integrity, like no ethics, and just he's going to be in jail eventually. Towards the end, he just stole $650,000 for the back management expenses. The
Mhm.
judge made him put that back, but we never could get the court date, so I just had to walk away. It was painful.
Wow. Wow. And I imagine there's, uh, physician to physician, a certain, amount of built-in trust,
Oh, yeah. I mean, this
right?
is someone who's in charge of people's lives. I know now, actually, he's not even board certified in emergency medicine, and he isn't board certified in anything because there was all kinds of other issues that came out towards the end with the
Mhm.
like alcohol and drug abuse and stuff. But man, just a nasty individual that I made a very poor decision. That was a very bad mistake on my part, and I
Yeah.
learned a lot from it.
Have you gone into other business ventures where deeper due diligence was part of the approach? Or, I mean, this might scare you off,
Yeah.
to
Yeah, I'm
trust.
pretty gun shy there. I've been
No.
approached a couple of times, and some people I know and trust quite well, but I'm just that was a really bad experience. So the biggest takeaway from that lesson and that mistake is that if you don't have majority ownership, then just don't bother, because at the end of the day, those majority shareholders, they're calling the shots. They control the bank accounts,
Uh-huh.
and his secret weapon was that he had majority ownership. So he literally just put the clamps down on the business, refused to make distributions, refused to pay bills, like an
Mm,
electricity bill. Like you can't run a CT scanner without electricity.
right.
And it got really bizarre in that he was just burning it to the ground, and he
Mm,
had like 55% ownership of it. And he just was going to burn it to the ground just to punish us. And but really it was just an operational company. So he owned like the physical CT scan machine and
yeah.
had the lease on the business. So I mean he was just going to run it to the ground and then start over again.
Oh, you approached the FBI, like, was Medicare fraud, when that occurs, where does that get, is that a separate reporting?
Yeah, so there's in Texas there's Texas Department of Insurance because it involves some insurance, and
Yeah.
then the FBI was just kind of the physical threats, and there was some fraud in that he was inflating the a bunch of assets to secure. It was a Ponzi scheme, so he
Uh,
just used one location, inflated the assets to get the loan for the next one, and the next one, and the next one. So it crumbled around him eventually. So there was two locations in Nebraska that went bankrupt, two or three that went bankrupt in Texas. He lost the one in Louisiana. I'm not sure whatever happened in Arizona, but just a nasty guy. Jeez.
yeah. And so, and that was a number of years. And were you, a minority, kind of more passive investor, or were you
No, I
actually
had
working in the
So
project?
I was working it, there was just 3 of us that really worked the location, were the face of it, involved in the community, but I only had 10% ownership.
Yeah.
So, if you don't have majority ownership or have a collection of people that you trust that have that majority ownership,
Uh-huh.
he can literally do anything he wants.
Yeah.
Absolutely anything. If you don't have the money to get it to trial, he can do anything. So I spent $250,000 on legal bills in less than a year, just blowing through money. The whole time he's starving us out. So he's not giving us our paychecks. He's not making distributions from the business. Um, it was diabolical, but until you can get it to trial, they can do anything they want. And then COVID hit and we couldn't get a court date. So just Just bad timing.
Wow. Imagine, do you have some sort of Google alert set up with this person's name and the word indictment, or
Uh,
would where
I
did
I don't
you
I
do you,
don't he screwed so many people over that they all reach out and contact me every time another business goes bankrupt. So, there's some other people that track him. Yeah, there's a guy named Joe that, I got to know real well that this individual had, screwed over many, many times, and so he kinda reaches out and gives me a phone call every time we find something bad about him, so
yeah,
I get a chuckle. Like, it's, karma comes for everybody eventually. He'll be in jail at some point, but
yeah.
it won't help me.
Wow. I wanted to ask about the lottery. This was in your bio. I was going to ask you about it. It sounds like a fascinating story of what you did with those winnings. Kind of an
Yeah.
unusual winner's tale.
Yeah, so
Tell
it put us in a very good position. So, I wrote a leadership book, Be the Weight Behind the Spear. It's my whole personal leadership ethos and really promoting community engagement and building up leadership skills for young people, our next generation of leaders. And that money allowed us to get that message out there. The book did very well, got a Pulitzer Prize nomination, Independent Press Award, and several other awards. And then we started a nonprofit organization, the Weight Behind the Spear Foundation, and that started after Hurricane Helene out in Western North Carolina. Just biblical level of destruction and flooding just tore your heart out. And as I sat there, just, oh, what can we do? Because we used to vacation and spend a lot of time in Asheville and Western North Carolina. So we started the foundation, we raised some money, and we partnered with really nice organizations, Samaritan's Purse, that people may be familiar with, Edward Graham, and we're able to make some contributions and help with the rebuilding process. And there's lots to be done. I mean, there's still a lot of destruction out there.
yeah, a lot of recovery
Yeah.
still needs to happen. Yeah. Um, yeah, that was the hurricane where like some small towns were quite literally wiped off.
Yes,
That's
just
just the map.
huge flash floods, just insane. I got 1,000-year record rains that had never been seen before, like literally like biblical level. Yeah, they're still recovering.
Yeah. So the book, the leadership book, "Be the Weight Behind the Spear." What's the story behind that phrase? Does that come from your military experiences?
So it's been my personal leadership ethos. I put it on the bottom of my challenge coin, my military challenge coin, gravitate hastum, Latin, gravity of the spear.
Mhm.
And working with special operations, I've been a medical director for combat search and rescue, the PJs, the pararescue. These are special forces operators. They jump out of aircraft into the most helicopters and planes into the most insane, dangerous environments on planet Earth to rescue men and women. So downed aviators or on mountaintops, for civilian rescues. And when you see those types of just heroic individuals, what sets them apart? Like, what makes them so special? And I found out that it's the weight behind their spear because they're the tip of the spear. I cannot do those things. I do not jump out of helicopters. I do not take
Mm.
down bin Laden. Like, I save lives. I don't take lives, but these guys do amazing things. And it's the weight behind their spear. It's teachers, coaches, volunteers, and families. That's who's given them the amazing confidence to do what they do. And you just realize that that's something everybody can be a part of.
Yeah.
In your community, be the weight behind someone or something or an organization that really matters. So that's being the weight behind the spear.
And I mean, I think of, I mean, I've done work as a consultant and a coach in civilian medicine. I've met people who retired from military medicine and have ended up in civilian medicine. And the one common theme, you often hear the phrase "the tip of the spear." If there's a problem, a mistake, an error, harm to a patient, unfortunately, you hear this phrase of, well, the person at the tip of the spear gets blamed or punished, when sometimes that's not really maybe the real root cause of the problem. So I think I'd be curious to hear your thoughts around medical settings of any type, how the weight behind the spear, leadership, structure, systems, communication, how does that prevent mistakes?
Yeah,
It's
well,
have that.
like as an emergency physician, I've worked in civilian medicine for 20 years. Where I probably have countless stories there that you can chat about, but it's always the system issues. It's
Right.
organizational issues, and then leadership coming from the top. You look at CEOs, and so there's one chapter of my book that I titled. If you were a Seinfeld fan, you remember
Yeah.
the Chief Nazi? Okay,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so this is instead of no soup for you, it was no narcs for you, and it
Huh.
really talked about the whole opioid crisis in
Yeah.
this country and how that started with some government intervention there, where they had set up pain as the fifth vital sign, and pain is completely subjective. It's different for every individual.
Mhm.
You know, you take objective vital signs, blood pressure, temperature, heart rate. Those are hard, fast, real numbers, and changes in those numbers have increased rates of morbidity and mortality, period. It's
Mhm.
fact.
Mhm.
Now, pain is just super subjective. So what they did in the early 2000s is they made pain this fifth vital sign,
Mhm.
and they tied it to CMS reimbursement. Then physicians started getting it tied to their bonus structures with all these satisfaction score systems. And so just take a wild guess. When you take chronic pain and drug seekers and they come to the emergency department for pain, what do you think is going to happen if you don't give them
Right.
narcotics?
Well, and
Hmm.
they're asked that
Yeah,
subjective
yeah.
one,
They're asked.
right?
They're asked that and flat out like, oh, my pain is 10 out of 10 and I want some opiates. Well, it's probably not safe to do that,
Uh-huh.
so you don't. Well, then you get a 0 out of 10, and the whole scoring system was tied to bonus structures,
Well,
so
and then patient experience
oh,
sort
yeah, yeah, patient
of
experience, so it was all
right?
tied to their marketing, for their satisfaction scores, and we know now that that was really kind of what started the opioid crisis and was killing millions of Americans, tied with, like Purdue Pharma, they just lied about the addictive,
Mhm.
tendencies of these medications.
Right.
So it was just a perfect storm of errors there that, were definitely foreseeable, and, in residency, so like 2003, 2004-ish, I got the nickname the naproxen Nazi. So naproxen is like a non-steroidal medication like ibuprofen.
Mhm.
And I wasn't comfortable with this big jump in opioids. I knew the drug companies were lying because you could clearly tell like just the seeking behavior and how bad people craved these medications. It was clearly addictive. Now they lied and said that it wasn't.
Yeah.
But so I just they didn't prescribe them. And in the pharmacies in the area, I had some friends that actually worked. So like, dude, they call you the naproxen Nazi, man,
Yeah.
because you never give opiates. And I was very proud of that because as rolls forward 20 years later, I was completely right. We've killed millions of people, and as an emergency doctor, I've been in those rooms and had to call those codes and talk with families and sit down and cried with those families. It's very hard, but there's a lot of mistakes there that could definitely have been avoided.
Yeah. And in a situation like that where you have systemic structures and incentives, and at some point, I'm sure, I mean, the idea that we don't want people to be in pain is well intended,
Yeah.
but for people listening, I'm sure you know this term, or high reliability organizations. I think one of the principles is, I'm paraphrasing it, but like avoiding overly simple solutions to complex problems. And, it sounds like, yeah, this overly simple idea of like people shouldn't be in pain led to death
Yeah.
on
I
a
mean, and
large
it's
scale.
just,
And
and you really simplify that. They just ignored like human behavior and reality. So
yeah.
they're, just, I came up with this kind of my love phrase, don't feed the bears.
Uh-huh.
Like, don't feed the bears. If you
Yeah.
don't feed the bears, they don't come around looking for trash in the garbage and like the opiates. So you could tell when there were physicians that were just giving out the opiates, they would all show up. Like
Yeah.
they had a very secret websites, and they would tell like they could see the license plate on the car. They know the physician there, and they're like,
That-
"Oh, Candyman's here," and they all show up out of the woodwork. And then when I'm on duty, they just magically don't show up. Because
yeah.
it was
Wow.
crazy. But if you don't feed the bears,
Wow.
just like when you go to, the national parks, don't feed the bears.
Yeah. Well, and you think about, and this is maybe in a negative way, the weight behind the spear, the causes of this opioid epidemic. I think it would be unfair. Some people would say, like, "Oh, these are greedy doctors." I mean, what you're describing, I mean, it's far. That would be an overly simplistic explanation.
Yeah, there was a component to that for sure,
Sure.
but you were punished if your scores were not good.
Yeah.
So, like, I know people that lost jobs. I
Mm.
know people that I mean, it wasn't just your bonus. Like, if you weren't getting satisfaction scores, so you're bribing people with drugs that are dangerous drugs and life-threatening to keep your job and provide food for your family. So that was really bad. That was probably, like, maybe 2007, 8 through maybe 2011, 12, kind of that time frame.
Uh,
And then we started to turn that corner again. We're like, wow, this is really bad. This is really out of hand. And state legislators started getting involved. So when I was in Florida briefly, they called them the pill mills,
right.
Oxycontin Express flights. So they would fly from all over the United States to Fort Lauderdale, and
Mhm.
these drug seekers would hit like 30 paid clinics at the same time, and just it
Yeah.
just there were so many overdose deaths. So my shifts that I was working, my colleague, I'm like, "What is happening here?" He's like,
Mhm.
"Oh man, yeah, it's really bad. They hit all these pain clinics because there were like a crazy amount of opioid overdose deaths in Florida. The
Mhm.
state legislator got involved and just put the clamp down on it completely
Yeah.
because the hospitals weren't policing themselves. They were just
Yeah.
feeding the addiction and crazy overdoses. Boy, yeah, I can't even tell you how many hundreds or even 1,000 people I watched die with overdose deaths. It was
Mm.
crazy.
Gosh. And, it seems like there's this pattern of problem solving mistakes, if you will. Like if people said the problem is pain, we don't want people to be in pain when they set up all these structures, then you ended up with, overdoses. And that seems like maybe did the pendulum swing too far in the other direction where people who are legitimately in pain find it difficult
I
get
I
in
think
with the
you see some people we'll talk about that. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, you've got terminal cancer. If you broke your forearm, I mean, it's if you really legitimately need it, I mean, it's there for you. You just have to jump through a few hoops.
Yeah,
But like life is not a pain-free state, you
sure.
know? Outside of those types of medical conditions, when you sprain your ankle, it hurts,
Uh-huh.
right? You've torn some ligaments. That's your body telling you don't walk on your ankle. So
Right.
the answer is not a narcotic pain medication that could
Mhm.
potentially kill you. It's
Right.
use the crutches and don't walk on your ankle and keep
Yeah.
it elevated and ice it. So crazy. So I was a professor at Duke University and I would just teach residents all the time. Listen, narcotics are the only medication that we give that guaranteed increase your risk of death and disability for a non-life-threatening condition.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
pain is not life-threatening. There's different variations, and certainly if you have cancer and just had surgery, but pain will not kill you, but these
Mhm.
drugs will definitely increase your risk of death. So there has to be a balance there. And
Yeah.
for a good chunk of those early 2000s, there was not.
Yeah. I mean, I can compare and contrast within my family. My mother-in-law fell and broke both of her forearm bones. We were on vacation in Italy. She fell, tripped in the airport, fell, and broke
Oh,
both
no.
bones. And the approach in Italy was incredibly conservative. They wouldn't give her anything stronger than basically ibuprofen. In the field or in the hospital, they had to take X-rays and move her arm and do the initial setting of her arm. And she was in so much pain. It was painful to see the pain she was in. And part of the explanation we heard was that they were just they are very, very cautious. And to your point, Dr. McConkey, that opioids would be reserved for somebody that was like, terminal dying situation. And she flew back to the US to get surgery without stronger painkillers.
Wow, that's pretty wild. See, that's that extreme where that's that sounds that's not even humane.
It seemed inhumane at the time, or it was painful to see. My wife more recently here in the US slipped and fell and broke her ankle pretty badly, compound fracture, multiple fractures. In the field, she was given fentanyl. At the hospital, she was also given ketamine. I mean, like it seemed like it was the other extreme of like, pumping her. I mean, well, it's not maybe not the best phrasing, pumped her full of pain meds. And, but she was very, very cautious post surgery, knowing the risk of like really only taking the pain med if it was really, really, really
Yeah.
bad to avoid that risk of addiction.
I mean, you don't need to suffer, but just need to make sure you use it cautiously so you don't get addicted to it. I mean, there is a balance. Just
Yeah.
some people can't find it.
Yeah. And yeah, so it was just interesting in the past 3 years to kind of compare fairly recent differences in different countries. Sorry to get too
Mhm.
sidetracked
Yeah.
on, but these are tough things to figure out, it seems. I wanted to ask, when you think about courage. You talk about courage and write about courage. What does that look like in everyday leadership? Like not just in military settings. And in your situations, was it courageous to push back against the norm in terms of prescribing opioids? Is that would you label that courage?
I mean, it's, if you use that kind of in a similar realm of, accountability and integrity, for me, just doing the right thing, having that courage to do the right thing, looking out for other people. I'm going to lose some money. It's going to piss off a lot of executives. I got yelled at a lot. I literally, wow, early in my career, the first year, I had one of my bosses, the regional director, sit down with me as a young first year attending and ask me to write more narcotic prescriptions.
Uh-huh.
Point blank.
Uh,
Say, Josh, I need you to write more narcotic prescriptions.
It was more of a command, it sounds like, than a
Oh yeah. And I was like, whoa, I didn't expect this coming.
yeah.
And then he sat down and he gave me this little speech and he said, like, Josh, they're only hurting themselves, man,
Mm,
only hurting themselves. And I was so irate. I was so angry because a week later, a woman came in, hopped up on all these narcotics that he had prescribed him personally. She was overdosed and dying. She was 30 years old. I intubated her. I'm sending her up to the ICU. We saved her life. And then her daughter, and so the patient's mother, which is the grandmother to this little 8-year-old girl, comes up to me and she says, "My mommy gonna be okay?" And she's pulling on my white coat. And it was all I could do to not strangle this other doctor because he flat out asked me point blank, write more narcotics. They're only hurting themselves.
uh,
And then he almost kills this woman.
yeah.
And there's her 8-year-old daughter with me right now crying. I was so pissed off. And I read about that in the book as well. And I saw that a couple of different times.
Uh-huh.
And you've got to do the right thing. You have to take care of people. People are trusting you with your lives. So I don't know if it's much courage as it is integrity. And I just won't
Right.
compromise my integrity.
Yeah. And I don't have a dictionary definition of courage in front of me, but from your stories and what you're talking about, maybe one working definition would be doing the right thing even in the face of negative consequences. Like we talk about people feeling safe to speak up in different environments. In a workplace, if people are bullied by their boss for disagreeing or punished for speaking up, people will learn to protect themselves or their paycheck by not speaking up. And I hear some people say, well, oh, we need people to be more courageous. And part of me says, well, that would be great, but it's unfair. Back to your point earlier about like if people's jobs are at stake, I think it's a better approach to try to reduce the fear, reduce the need
Yeah.
for courage where people aren't being punished. People want to do the right thing, but we can't put people in situations where there's such strong incentives or to do the wrong thing or punishment for doing the right thing. What about that definition of courage?
That's a great definition. And that's failure of leadership,
Mhm.
failure of executive leadership. If you don't create a climate where people feel comfortable telling the truth and doing the right thing, you're probably, if you look at your mission statement of whatever organization you're in, you're probably not doing that right thing. Yeah, that's failure of leadership. But and I've made a very big point and have been very successful in just making that a central tenet to my leadership, and that be the weight behind the spirit ethos. It's done well on the civilian side, a nonprofit organization, and the military. So
Yeah. So we talk about wanting to avoid mistakes or learning from mistakes. What are some of your lessons about helping people be more resilient when they're in a tough situation or they've made a mistake? What can we do to be more resilient in those situations?
so you have to let people make their own mistakes, right? They don't. So I think the perfect example is what we see now. There's like, some management positions and then just parents that do the lawnmower parenting.
Mhm.
So they don't let their kid make any decisions. They don't let their children make any mistakes. They're always there micromanaging. I mean, everyone knows that boss that micromanages.
Mhm.
Nobody likes them. All
Yeah.
right. Everybody hates that boss that micromanages. You're not learning. You're always watching over your shoulder. You're constantly questioning everything you do. And you're going to be pissed off at me if I do this and this and this. So that's leadership for me. You have to surround yourself with good people and you have to be able to recognize that talent. And then you let them do their job. I don't micromanage. I
Mhm.
tell them the objective. Here's my intent. Get it done.
Yeah.
If they're not getting it done, or if I have to get in there and micromanage, that's on me. I made a bad decision.
Yeah.
So I either need to mentor that person more, or they got to go and we find somebody else that can do the job.
Yeah.
So that's all leadership. And, let them make mistakes. That's how they learn. Do it safely. You don't sit there and watch somebody make horrific. In my line of work as an emergency doctor, mistakes kill people.
Sure.
So when I supervise residents, I'll let them talk about some things and make some decisions. But if it's going to be something dangerous, we step right in. Here's
Sure.
our learning moment. You're
Uh-huh.
going to kill this dude. Don't do that.
Or learn from a near miss or a good
Yeah. Also, there's your
test.
nursing staff and your ancillary staff are really important as well. I empower everybody to speak up, talk, ask questions, and don't have a big ego.
Uh-huh.
Because when you let those egos come in and you take everything personal, oh, they're questioning me, this, that's dangerous because you're creating an environment where people can't speak up
Mhm.
and talk about dangerous situations. So, just those things right there, it has been very it's helped me in my career.
Yeah. And what about, helping young people? I'd love to talk a little bit more about the children's book. Are there specific lessons around resilience and other themes that are important to you?
Yeah, incredibly important. So that's what I've seen a lot as a military commander is I found that it's very difficult to teach those resiliency skills and build some of those basic leadership skills when they're 20 years old. All
Mhm.
right.
Uh,
There's a lot of yelling. There's a lot of push-ups. It's
Yeah.
much more difficult. So we have to do it younger. And so the Be the Weight series, it's a series of children books on leadership. The first is The Heart of a Leader. It's got that right behind me
Yep.
on the bookshelf there. So it just was released officially yesterday. So it's on
Oh,
Amazon
congrats.
and then on the publisher's website as well. But it's going to be part of an 8-book series, and each book is going to talk about some issues of leadership. And you ask yourself, like, how do we teach a 5-year-old leadership? Well, we did it. I
Uh-huh.
have a world class Disney illustrator, Joe Yakovetic, amazing individual, so skilled. And for a children's book, that's everything.
Yeah.
So I've got just building up those leadership skills, being a leader. It's not about being the strongest and the fastest. You just have to care and have a heart and be there for people and stand up for people around you. And it's such a good message. I'm really excited. It's been submitted for quite a few awards. There's nothing like it out there, and it's going to be part of a whole children's series. So we're really excited.
Yeah. Well, again, congrats on that. What are the target ages, the age range that the book would be best for?
Yeah, so you're basically like 5 to 9 years old is that target range. As early as 3 years old, you just sit down with them and read those stories. So I was a big fan of Mercer Meyer when I was a kid growing up. So he did the Little Critters books. Did you ever read those or read
No.
those to kids?
Oh, I don't know
Just
that.
it's just a wonderful series, and they're called the Little Critter books. And there was always a little spider, and then some had a little mouse was a little recurring character that was always on each page, hiding, doing something. And
Right.
so even the young kids, they love the pictures. They want to see ours is a little squirrel. Like, where's the squirrel? What's he doing? But they're still hearing all those lessons of leadership. So you start as early as like 3 years old, 3, 4 years old. They're getting all those lessons. They're hearing what you say, but
Mhm.
they're there for the books and the illustrations. And then as they get older, they can certainly read that and understand that more for themselves. But
Yeah.
you have to start early. You can't do this when they're 20. You can do it at 20. It's just really, really hard.
Yeah, even though I mean, I think people would say a 20-year-old's brain is not completely fully formed, there are probably enough habits, both good and bad,
Yeah.
that have developed at that point, being fully formed enough. That's why, I think it's interesting when we talk about leadership traits. I always wonder how much of that is just innate or instilled in somebody through parents, church, school, in whatever sequence at a young age. Like talk about, some companies talk about, these traits of like, we want leaders to be humble. And I'm still not sure somebody can really learn humility beyond a certain point.
Yeah, if that hasn't been really kind of early in the home and your mentor, like your parents growing up, gosh, I know quite a few examples, like even some family members that you just see. So maybe an uncle out there that you're just like, God, that guy is just such a, and then like, huh, it's kind of crazy. The kids are just like him.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. The cousins are
yeah,
just
yeah,
yeah. But the book focusing on, courage as we've talked about so far, character, kindness. So I'd be curious how that's portrayed in the book, because I think sometimes people make a mistake of thinking, well, kindness means being a pushover or being weak. So this is a leading question. I wouldn't view
Yeah,
it that
no,
way. I'm
being
guessing.
strong, when that bully gets up in your face and say, "You guys are losers," hey, have respect for yourself, for your teammates. You stand up, you still shake their hand. You're a professional.
Mhm,
Even if you lose, and then also when you win. And
mhm,
so being kind, just having like one of the new kids in the school and kind of isolated and they don't know anybody, being that leader.
mhm.
You sit down with them, they're tying their shoe, like, "Hey, how you doing?" Like, "Welcome to school. Do you wanna play soccer with us today?"
Yeah.
And just reaching out and being inclusive and letting people know that they matter.
Mhm.
That's being a leader. You recognize that, that's kindness. You're not a pushover. Matthew McConaughey, I just watched a clip with him. It was fantastic.
Yeah.
So he had this clip, and I'm not sure what podcast this might have been on, but he talked about being a nice guy and a good man.
Mhm.
The nice guy, just kinda gets along with everybody, kinda goes along with the flow. Difference between a nice guy and a good man is a good man isn't always a nice guy.
Mhm,
So, when
mhm.
you push them past those breaking points or you start infringing on other people or you start to threaten them or their family, a nice guy, is not gonna get it done. The good man stands up, and he's not always a nice guy at that point,
Yeah.
because he has integrity, he stands up for what he believes in.
Yeah.
That's the difference, and I saw that just recently, and I thought that was fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, the default could be nice in terms of,
Mhm.
not causing any trouble. But if you see someone else, let's say, in a workplace scenario, an inappropriate comment, a lot of people might just kind of say, well, this is uncomfortable it's uncomfortable to begin with. It would be uncomfortable to challenge it. But like that good man, that good person might speak up and say, well, no, that's not appropriate. That's not how we treat people here. Whether that was in
Absolutely.
front of others or pulling that person aside,
Yeah,
that's not
that's real leadership.
I would agree. So well, I hope people will check out the books, The Heart of the Leader, the children's book, the first in the series, and then the previous book, Be the Weight Behind the Spear. And maybe as a final question, Dr. Josh McConkey, of all the titles that you've had in the military and in the medical world, I know it says on your website you've thrown your hat in the ring for another potential title, Lieutenant Governor.
Yeah, right.
Service is important to you. I'd just love to hear your story about deciding to run for office.
For me, just seeing the lack of accountability of our, elected leaders in this country, and when you take away that accountability, and when people are making decisions, it descends into chaos and Lord of the Flies.
Oh,
So there just has to be that level of accountability. For me, just personally, when you shut down schools, you shut down churches, there was a lot of decisions made over the past several years that have had a very negative outcome on an entire generation of Americans. And that's what I see every day in the emergency department and as a military commander. And so stepping up, that I had no inclination to do this when writing the book, but
mm,
the further along we've got here, several years down the road, we need more leaders, and especially in healthcare and military leadership. We need more people with accountability and integrity in public office.
mm.
And just from my experience, I haven't seen a lot of that. So we're going to get out there and make a difference. And there's only one way to find out.
And that's going to be 2028. Correct.
2028 for lieutenant governor here in North Carolina.
All right. Well, we will be paying attention to that, and I hope that's a good experience for you and the state. I wish you well. Yeah, I hope that doesn't turn out to be a mistake. I really hope.
Yeah, we'll find out. Well, and that's the great thing is I don't need this. Like
Yeah.
I have a career, I've got a wonderful family, the emergency department, the military and the reserves. I, I think it's needed.
Yeah.
And if I end up not being successful, I just go back to do what I'm doing. I mean, I don't need this. I
Yeah.
don't need to be a politician. I feel that calling. And I think we need better leadership. So I'm going to try.
Yeah. Well, you have many, many things that you're doing, and this could be one more thing for you. So again, Dr. Josh McConkey, it's been a real pleasure, real honor to have you here on the show. Thanks again.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.